Been a little while since we talked about Spider-Man, and to start today's video, I just had a small question for you that I wanted to know from you. Specifically is, would you want to see The Amazing Spider-Man 3? Would you want to see this film made with the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? And if you did, what would you want to see out of it? Do you want a continuation after the events of No Way Home? Do you want a continuation earlier than that after Amazing Spider-Man 2 leading up to the years of No Way Home? I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below on that. And if you enjoy this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe because it helps me out a ton. Now, there have been a lot of you asking me if I'm making a video on the whole situation with Kevin Conroy. I've been trying to, use the announcements tab on YouTube along with our Discord and our Twitter, which are in the description down below if you're interested to answer that question. And the answer is yes. It's just that it's taking me a while. So far, that video is an hour long, and it starts with a 3-minute or so tribute to Kevin Conroy's vocal lines, and I believe it will end with a similar one with little bits sprinkled throughout. It's a discussion between Nate and I, just really on some of the stuff that made Kevin so special and interesting and made his Batman work so well and how he affected our lives. So that's something I'm working on. It's just that it's very emotional for me. It's been really, really hard to make, and it's something I want to put a lot of time, care, and effort into. So it's not something I'm rushing. It could be done as early as tomorrow. It could take me a few days. I just don't know. It really just depends on how long it takes me and how well of a respectful job I think I can do with it in the meantime. So I'm really trying with that. I just wanted to give you an update on that. But the reason that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 came up was that it's been in the news a little bit off and on since No Way Home. And let's be honest, it was for years before that. Essentially the idea of, well, whatever happened to Andrew? I mean, Toby at least got his 3 movies, right? But Andrew didn't. What gives? And recently over on Fandom Wire, there was an article published that I thought was interesting talking about the idea that The Amazing Spider-Man 3 is reportedly under development as a last-ditch effort by Sony to bring audiences back to theaters from streaming, basically for Sony movies in particular, and kind of get the ball rolling on that, because it can be really profitable to do streaming, but it's extremely profitable to do movie theaters. That's a proven formula, and ever since COVID and the pandemic, it's been something that took a hit. Now, it still certainly makes money, but it's not hitting the highs a lot of the times that it was pre-pandemic. So the idea, if this is true, and this is an alleged report that I am not making up, this is Fandom Wire, if you have any problems, don't take it up with me, is that they are supposedly working on Amazing Spider-Man 3 following the release of No Way Home in order to actually get people to come back to movie theaters and pay for the tickets and want to be there and continue supporting theaters and basically making more money for Hollywood. That's really what it comes down to. A direct quote from this is, recent reports have also suggested that the studio has taken a step forward and has a deal with the actor. Under this new deal, Garfield would appear in several upcoming films as Spider-Man. However, the studio might not only focus on bringing the American actor back, but also on finally bringing the audience back to theaters. Rumors about Andrew Garfield making a comeback as Spider-Man started after the release of Spider-Man No Way Home. Fans have been curious if the studio is planning something for the actor. The latest reports have suggested that the studios may have finally listened to fans. A reliable source has revealed that both Sony and Marvel are planning Garfield's comeback together. The Twitter user Embermain, I've never heard of this person, Embermain, has revealed that Sony and Marvel have signed a deal with the mainstream star, that's Andrew Garfield, for The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Talked more about it, essentially, and then asked the question, would that actually bring an audience back to theaters? It's interesting that this movie, No Way Home, the movie that is supposedly inspiring them to bring back The Amazing Spider-Man 3, is honestly one of the biggest successes for movies in a long time. So it does make sense that Sony would want to possibly focus on Spider-Man, would want to do more with that, especially because that they wanted Morbius to do better than it did. Like, it's very obvious that whether you like Morbius or not, hashtag it's Morbin time, that they wanted that to do much better than it actually ended up doing. at the box office. And there is a lot going on right now with nostalgia, because basically another thing Fandom Wire mentioned in another article was how everybody is really, really excited to see the X-Men in Marvel, particularly, I will say, Wolverine. For the most part, the buzz around Hugh Jackman returning to the role of Wolverine has been huge. I would say it's been huge, huh? But people are really, really loving that. There's a lot of nostalgia built up there. And there was a ton as well with No Way Home, which, spoilers for No Way Home, I guess, because I would assume you saw it if you care to watch this video. But, you know, we know Andrew Garfield was back in that, and so was Tobey Maguire. So with all of this nostalgia going on, I kind of wanted to actually ask you specifically if you would want to see it and what you would want to see. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what I want to see as well with the movie, because one thing that I found very interesting is, I'm not going to argue that the Amazing Spider-Man movies are my favorite movies ever. That's just not the case. But I think that they get a lot of hate and a lot of shade. And I think that they are really, really, really enjoyable now when I went back and watched them again leading up to No Way Home. I used to be very critical of them. And to be honest, the reason I was critical of the first movie, and this is just me being point blank honest because I was very much younger, was it was coming off the back of the Tobey Maguire movies. And despite what people say, I don't really feel like those movies ended. I feel like they just kind of, I don't know, dropped off a little bit on a cliffhanger with the whole thing with MJ and Peter and will they, won't they kind of getting back together. So when they left that and they had their issues with Sam Raimi, where they essentially backed him into a corner to try and make stuff, and he said, I can't do it in that way, like I need it to be high quality, and they basically said, piss off. That was something that really annoyed me. Even when I was younger, it really rubbed me the wrong way, and I would say that I unfairly dragged a little bit of that attitude into Andrew's Amazing Spider-Man movies. Now, I still have my critiques of Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think it's a fun movie. However, it's really overly busy. I think they could have dropped at least one of the villains from that movie and really streamlined it and made it better. But that was a Sony problem and not necessarily a movie writer's problem. That wasn't an Andrew Garfield problem. That wasn't a staffing problem. What that was Sony pushing so hard to try and set up a Spider-Man universe in order to get the Sinister Six and other things going, that they were more focused on that than they were on letting the director and writers actually do what they wanted to do with the story. So because of all that, my biggest thing with this movie that I would want to see is the directors and writers actually having more control over it. Now, I'm actually not opposed to studio oversight. I'm not opposed to them coming out and being like, hey, listen, this does not work with this character. Like, let's say they wanted to make Spider-Man, I don't know, like they wanted to change like some very big fundamental thing about him, right? They were like, well, now it's Spider-Man, he has no powers and he'll never have powers again. Let's make him Batman. Well, of course, like if the studio wants to step in and say, hey, that doesn't work, let's not do that, I'm totally fine with that. But with Amazing Spider-Man 2, where the studio was just ramrodding different things into the movie and forcing them on the writers and directors, and same with what they were doing a bit with Spider-Man 3, I would say to maybe a lesser extent, but still being annoying with it. I think that Sony has had their own foot stuck in their mouth several times by trying to hire writers and directors, but then replace them with executives who think they know more because they're trying to sell toys and stuff. I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. I think that's a little foolish, and I think that that's something they would need to avoid in The Amazing Spider-Man 3. I'm very torn on where I would want this movie to take place. Part of me would love to see how Andrew's doing following the events of No Way Home, but I also feel like I could see that in a future Marvel movie where he just comes back and interacts with Tom Holland again, which to me would be really fun. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking for out of the MCU right now, is to have fun. I feel like a lot of the projects' writing has gone downhill with these different projects, not all of them. I have heard that Wakanda Forever is written very well. I haven't seen it yet. And I know that I actually enjoyed Doctor Strange too, but I do feel like there's been a little less effort put into the writing department of some of these movies. So that's something that I would really, really want to see done well, but I'm very concerned and interested in where they would make this take place. There's a line in No Way Home that was super interesting to me that I thought would be really cool to explore, which was when Andrew's Spider-Man kind of talks about how after Gwen died, he was just so angry and he tried to come back, but he just felt lost. And he did a lot of bad things that he wasn't proud of. Now, we don't know necessarily the way that he says it. It almost makes it sound like he killed some of the criminals that he fought. I'm not sure if he did that or he just severely injured them. You know, that's up to your interpretation of the line and of what he's talking about. It's left a little vague. But I thought that that kind of angrier Spider-Man time could be something very interesting to see. It just depends if they could make it look like it fits after that movie. I personally think that Andrew doesn't look like he's aged much, so I don't think it would be very hard to do a follow-up to ASM 2 that then fills in the blanks between 2 and No Way Home. However, I also know a lot of people just want to move on and see what happened after No Way Home. So I'm kind of open to either with this. I thought it was interesting that I ran a poll over on Twitter, which is definitely not the, the most unbiased platform to run any kind of numbers by. But out of my followers who interacted with it, which was only like 220 something people, but it was interesting to me. I asked, would you be interested, would you want to watch Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man 3 if it were to be made? I gave the options of yes, no, depends on trailers, or other. And if we combine yes and depends on trailers, basically, almost, I would say, over 90% of people are at least open to the movie, And that's not even including other, which some of the others had interesting explanations as well, which you can read through as well. But I thought this was interesting that out of the people who I talked to on my Twitter, at least, who again are superhero fans, so maybe that's a little bit skewed, 90% of that 220 people would want to see the movie. Now, that's nothing out of what you need to make a profitable movie, but it's still kind of an interesting gauge. I thought it would be a lot less people that were interested. From all the hate that these movies get, I really thought it would be something like 60 or 70% maybe of the people who followed me, who interacted, would be like, oh yeah, that would be cool. But 90% being open to it, at least, depending on the trailers, or just straight up wanting to see it. That's kind of nuts to me. It's surprising to me how people have softened on those movies over time and really are open to the Andrew Garfield interpretation of Spider-Man now. So I guess I want to know what you'd want to see from this in the comments down below. I also want to know if you ever think it would happen. Now, when I was talking about everything going up to No Way Home, I got probably thousands of people who said just random shit oh, he'll never come back. You'll never see Toby or Andrew again. It'll never happen. You're stupid for wanting that or even thinking it. It's those people were nowhere to be found as soon as No Way Home came out, and they just... They found out they were talking out of their ass. I thought that was funny, but I'm not a future, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what will happen, but I'd really love to see this project actually get picked up and go somewhere good. Personally, kind of as a closing thought for those of you who are still here, one thing I really want to see that I don't expect, but I would have loved to see, is a combination of the universes of basically Amazing Spider-Man and Venom. I always thought those two universes would go very well together. I guess I'm sadly not sure if it would work anymore now that you had the whole thing about Venom learning who Spider-Man was by going to the MCU. It's hard for me to believe that there would be no national news stories at all about Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man universe, but I don't know, maybe there's not. Maybe he kind of keeps his head down a little bit more and he's more of a local news thing. I don't really know. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below if you think that would work, if you'd ever want to see that, or where you'd want to see these characters. I also do think that the Tobey and Andrew Spider-Man would be really fun to see at some point in a Spider-Verse movie, like an animated movie, kind of see them pop up in that multiverse as well, but who knows? Let me know. Have a fantastic day. And before we go, I wanted to say a very quick and special thank you to some of our patrons: Jaden, Joypad Jake, Jason, Gregular, Mark, Vince, Sean, Colin, and Gervaris. Thank you all very, very much. You guys got to step up your game. I'm seeing Gervaris in the comments all the time. Where are you guys? But I do love you very much. You're supporting on Patreon, so just a little playful shade. Appreciate you so much. And if you're interested in the Patreon, the link is in the description down below. I hope everyone here has a fantastic day. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And as always, everyone, stay shway.